Rivers Cuomo, God Emperor of Weezer, once said in regard to the sound of Make Believe before its release, quote, "It's a combination of the Green Album and Pinkerton, if that's possible." The reason he added that little comment at the end is because Pinkerton and Green could not have been more different albums. Pinkerton was Weezer's second studio album following the mega critical and commercial success Blue. Blue's genre was power pop, similar to bands like The Raspberries and Cheap Trick. Pinkerton, however, was full-on emo. Not only was that a very different sound, it was also the mid-90s. It was raw, it didn't have a producer, it was personal, and people at the time hated it. Sure, now it's considered one of the greatest albums of the era, but it was just too different from the band's debut album to be all that beloved. It was clear to the band, Rivers specifically, that their next album needed a different sound. After the exit of Matt Sharp, the return of blues producer Rick Ocasek, and a 5-year hiatus, Green would be released as the band's third studio album. In stark contrast to Pink, it was poppy, it was full of hits, it had plenty of fun rock tunes, and people at the time liked it. Though much the opposite of Pinkerton, it's now considered pretty poorly by fans. However, it still sold better than Pinkerton and created loads of new fans. And so they kept the ball rolling, releasing their fourth album, Maladroit, the next year. It was their first album to feature bassist Scott Schreiner, and was also the band's worst-selling album at the time. Coincidence? Probably, as most people these days credit its failure to the bloat caused by the album's 13 similar-sounding tracks. This brings us back to the album not so immediately following Maladroit, Make Believe. Some work had started on Make Believe before Maladroit had even come out, but nothing solid would really happen until summer of 2002. This was when producer and founder of Def Jam Records, Rick Rubin, agreed to join the project. Rubin's time with the band would have a massive effect, not only on the album, but on Rivers as a person. Very early into production, when the band was demoing at SIR Studios, Cuomo had a crisis of confidence and threw everything out. He had begun to lose all joy in life, and felt he was failing to make anything of value on this new album. Pat, the band's drummer, would later say, he didn't believe in the music, because he didn't believe in himself. There were times he was physically ill coming out of the studio. Rubin, although being best known for working with bands like the Beastie Boys and Slayer, was a very spiritual man. When he learned of Rivers' issues, Rubin gave him a copy of The Gift. The Gift is a book of ghazals, or love songs, by 14th century poet Hafiz. However, contrary to what you'd think, many of these songs were directly tied to Hafiz's love of God. Rivers, however, was an atheist. He would later go on to describe how he found a way to connect to the book regardless in his Harvard readmission essay. As a child, I had decided that I was an atheist. I now read these spiritual teachings as coded instructions for how to connect with my musical creativity. For example, when Hafiz says, self-effacement is the emerald dagger you need to plunge deep into yourself upon this path to God, I read it as, self-effacement is the emerald dagger you need to plunge deep into yourself upon this path to musical creativity. This book, as well as meditation, which was also suggested by Rubin, fundamentally changed Rivers' outlook on life. He sold his home and most of his possessions, moved into an apartment next to Rubin, started volunteering at Project Angel Food in Hollywood 5 days a week, and took a 2-year-long vow of celibacy. This change in lifestyle undoubtedly affected all of Rivers' music from this point on, and we'll explore some of the songs which were directly affected in a little bit. But for now... You may remember I touched upon some of the album's pre-production issues earlier. I specifically mentioned how some work was done before Maladroit had even come out in May 2002, but I didn't elaborate too much. That's because everything that came out of those months was scrapped. Completely, except for 3 songs which would sort of turn into 3 other songs. After this, the band recorded at SIR, and an office space they rented out in LA for a bit over a year. These recordings proved similarly fruitless, and it wasn't until official pre-production would start at Cello Studios in December of 2003 that the band would really start to find the sound of Make Believe. Many songs that would later appear on the album were first demoed at Cello, including My Best Friend, The Other Way, Hold Me, Pardon Me, Peace, Perfect Situation, Haunt You Every Day, and We Are All on Drugs. This makes up 8 of 12 songs which would ultimately appear on the album, though many of these wouldn't be revisited until far later into the production. This is because, big shock, the band didn't like these recordings either. Rivers then started recording new demos on his own in early 2004, and the band all got back together again at Grandmaster Studios in July. At this point, Rivers had a list of 12 songs he felt were the ones, though he did make it clear that if anyone had any other ideas, he'd be open to suggestions. Hey, psst, they had a lot of suggestions. These initial 12 in order were Average Person, Last Chance, Beverly Hills, This Is Such a Pity, Freak Me Out, I'm a Robot, They Are Stupid, Save Me, Losing My Mind, You're the One, Outta Here, and Love Is the Answer. Of fucking course he played. Rivers then went back to Harvard in December, leaving the rest of the band to their own devices for 1 month. In that month, the band's remaining members finished The Damage in Your Heart, We Are All on Drugs, Where to Start, and Peace. In January, when Rivers returned, the band reconvened at Rick Rubin's house to track the progress of the album. There, they took another look at what they had done back at Cello and found they actually preferred a lot of those recordings over what they had done more recently at Grandmaster. But during this very delicate time when the gang was trying to get the album's 23 or so contenders back down to 12, their record studio Geffen came a knocking. They wanted the album out in spring of 2005. This was happening in January of 2005, which meant the latest they could turn in the masters of the songs was March, though this is just a straight up lie, as Rick Rubin used his industry clout to give the band a little bit of leeway and let them work up until April 6th. Yet, this still left the band with 3 months to turn 23 semi-finished songs into a 12-track album. My best guesses to the 11 songs which were essentially finished and unreleased are Average Person, which was supposed to be the album's first track for months, as well as Losing My Mind, You're the One, Love Is the Answer, Unbreak My Heart, Last Chance, I'm a Robot, They Are Stupid, Outta Here, Where to Start, and maybe Save Me. I'm sure many of these seem familiar to you, as 4 were later released on the 2010 compilation album, Death to False Metal, but the rest have yet to have releases outside of Rivers' solo demos. The 12 remaining tracks, in order, were Beverly Hills, Perfect Situation, This Is Such a Pity, Hold Me, Peace, We Are All on Drugs, The Damage in Your Heart, Pardon Me, My Best Friend, The Other Way, Freak Me Out, and Haunt You Every Day. Each of these songs has their own story and interesting details, so I'm going to try my best to give a brief rundown on the development of each. Beverly Hills was on the A-list to be put on the album since it was written in early 2004. Rivers was at the opening of the renovated Hollywood Bowl flipping through the program when he saw a picture of the band Wilson Phillips and, quote, just thought how nice it would be to marry like an established celebrity and live in Beverly Hills and be part of that world, and it was a totally sincere desire. When Brian Bell, fellow guitarist, that's insensitive. When Brian Bell, fellow guitarist for the band, first heard Rivers' demo, he called him up and said, "Congratulations, you wrote a hit song." And he was wrong. He wrote a mega hit song. Much to the chagrin of many a critic, Beverly Hills went on to be the top-selling digital download of 2005, score the band their first Grammy nomination, and even got a cover on Kids Bop 9. Truly, a musical achievement. Perfect Situation, the second track, was written in July 2002. The song was on Rivers' B-list and seemingly wasn't added until near the end of production, though not as last minute as some of the others. I can only imagine it made it on because of how much everyone who worked on it seemed to like it. Scott Schreiner said he pushed hard to get it on. Pat and Brian both expressed that to them, this song was very similar to those on the Green Album and classic Weezer. And Rivers even said that the first time he heard it played back to him, he cried. And it was mostly out of joy. Their instinct turned out to be correct, as the song saw more Billboard rock success than even Beverly Hills, though not as much in the pop realm. This Is Such a Pity had several different sounds and names from 2002 to 2004. Some of these names released to fans are Tell Me What You Did, What Is Going On, and Happy on Your Own. Scott would describe the process of putting together the song as tough. Just the drums had to be retracked 4 to 5 times alone. He further stated it was almost going to get thrown out, but somehow at the last minute it came together and it sounds absolutely magical to me. And that's one of my favorite songs on the album. Pity, as it was sometimes shortened, was then put on Rivers' A-list. He agreed with Scott later, saying it may be his favorite on the album altogether. Hold Me was the first example on the album of a song being directly influenced by Rivers' new lifestyle. It was written as an experiment by Rivers sometime around early 2003 to see how fasting would affect his songwriting. A fact he's not really proud of and kept quiet about for a while, as he was scared people would try to replicate it and starve themselves. The whole band seemed to be in agreement that the experiment paid off, however, as the sound of the song was very unique. The song features Rivers singing and strumming the intro alone, with the rest of the band not coming in until the nearly 1 minute mark. Brian accurately called this a ballsy move, but when the band kicked in at the chorus, it made a quote, very grandiose impact. Peace was a last-minute introduction, first demoed in November 2002. It was written during the first demo recording sessions at SIR, when Rivers was having issues with self-acceptance. He would say in an interview with Y100 in 2005, "This song was written at a time of no peace with me, when I was at the end of my rope. I felt like life had no meaning anymore. I was going out every night and trying to have fun, but it wasn't giving me any real satisfaction. I just started thinking, I gotta find a way to bring meaning back into my life, and recover my sensitivity and creativity, and I need to find some peace." We Are All on Drugs was the second single to be released off the album in July 2005. Contrary to popular belief, the song isn't literal. Rivers said himself in that same interview with Y100, "I'm singing more about the fact of how addicted we all are to stimulating ourselves, and overstimulating ourselves with music or whatever it is in our lives. In fact, the story behind how the song was written has nothing to do with actual drugs." At the time, Rivers had an apartment above the Sunset Strip, where every night he'd hear people living decadently and partying like crazy. He heard those sounds in his dreams, which led to him having a dream about a kid on a bus listening to loud hip-hop. He woke up and said, "Man, we're all on drugs." Let me assure you, they really genuinely thought they were saying something bold here. The Damage in Your Heart was initially put on Rivers' A-list, but after he wrote a few more demos, he took it off. It was damn close though, as Pat would remark that it was Rivers' 13th favorite out of the 12 on the album. A lot of trivia online is about how the non-Cuomo members of the band had to push for the song to be on the album, which I already went pretty into detail about earlier, so I guess that's all I have to say? Well, actually there is an additional fun fact. The song was only ever performed twice in concert. I don't know why that stuck with me, but I find this very funny. Pardon Me was very nearly not on the album. I know that sounds like very familiar, but it was really almost not on the album. At one point, it was on Rivers' A-list, but it was seemingly forgotten amongst the floods of demos and B-sides that the gang kept on CDs. In fact, when Brian remembered it while discussing the album at Rick Rubin's house, he ran to his car and dug through the quote 75 to 100, not even exaggerating, CDs of demos and B-sides until he found it, ran back inside, and made everyone listen to it. He felt the message that Rivers was trying to convey was so sincere and personal, yet so universal, that it deserved a fair shot. Quote, "It's hard to say I'm sorry in any sense, it's hard to admit fault, and I just think it's a song for all guys that just don't know how to express themselves, so they can at least sing that lyric to whoever they harm, their girlfriend or whatever." Pat then made a reference to the Bush administration, which I didn't get because I'm a baby. I don't know how I forgot this detail, but this was also one of the songs that was influenced by Rivers' newfound spirituality. It was written after he attended a meditation course where the teacher asked him to repeat over in his mind, "I seek pardon from all those who have harmed me in action, speech, or thought." My best friend had a rocky relationship with this album. Even when Rivers first wrote it and demoed it, it was a maybe. And then it was a hard no for several months. During that period, the people over at DreamWorks asked the band to submit a song for the soundtrack of some crappy early 2000s kid movie they were working on called, Shrek 2. Rivers submitted his first draft of the song to DreamWorks, who thought its lyrics were too clearly about Shrek, even though Rivers hadn't changed the lyrics at all before submitting it to DreamWorks. They rewrote it only to be denied yet again, which the band would later see as something of a blessing. Neither of these were the finished product of the song, and if it had been released on Shrek 2's soundtrack, it would have been the first Weezer song people would have heard in nearly 2 years. They remembered it existed a few months before the release of the album, patched it up, and gave it the 9th track spot. The Other Way is the only song on the album with a proper somber story behind it. Rivers' ex-girlfriend Jennifer Chiba had been in a relationship with musician Elliot Smith. Elliot Smith passed away of what many believe to be a suicide on October 21st, 2003. Rivers felt a strong desire to console Sheba, but he questioned his motives for wanting to do so. This can be seen oddly directly in the lyrics.
I have many doubts about my motives. I have many fears about my greed. I have always hurt the one that I love, so I'll turn and look the other way.
It was yet another last-minute addition, not being put on the track list until February 2005. Contrary to The Other Way, the origins of its neighbor on the album, Freak Me Out, are fucking stupid. Brian Bell saw a spider, and he got scared of the spider, so he wrote a song about being scared of a spider, and then he realized that was stupid, so he rewrote it slightly to be about a human. I'm not gonna talk about it anymore because I want to talk about Haunt You Every Day now. Fuck you. The last track on the album was Haunt You Every Day, which was included on Rivers' A-list from the beginning. Yet, it was still considered unlikely to appear on the album in January of 2005 by the band because this album is a fucking mess. It was an assignment song given to Rivers by Rick Rubin. He told Rivers, write a song like Billy Joel or Elton John, and Rivers did his best. He admitted he didn't hit the mark completely on that request, but he did succeed in writing it entirely on piano. Although this may not have been the first song he ever did that with, it was the first to be released on an album. Honestly, the song really deserves its own video, which I'm gonna do eventually, but what I will say now is if you haven't listened to Make Believe or refuse to, please at least listen to Haunt You Every Day. It's a masterpiece. Before we get to the next big section, I feel like I've earned a break. So let's take a minute and talk about the different album titles that Make Believe nearly had. And believe me, they had quite a lot of time to think of titles. Keep in mind, the band has said some of these were just goofs and gaffes, but I'm not sure which is which, so I'll just take them all seriously. By the way, I also made album covers for the Big Four and put the names through AI image generators, so whichever I like best gets put in. Either way, I'm fine, which is what Rivers called Album 5 in its early days. Somnambulous Dreams, which essentially means sleepwalkers' dreams. 1,000 Soviet children marching towards the sun, which is my personal favorite, although few details seem to exist behind this one, which implies this is the joke one, which implies I am stupid. And the Red Album, which as many of you know, never ever got used for an album name, not even once. In the end, they chose Make Believe. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. It might have something to do with The Tempest by Shakespeare because of a monologue from the play in the booklet for the album, but if you have a better answer, please leave it in the comments. The album was released on the 11th anniversary of Blue on May 10th, 2005. Reviews were incredibly torn, ranging from the absolute lowest I've seen for an album, with Pitchfork giving it a 0.04 out of 10, to as high as a 9.3 from IGN.
Is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
That's a higher score than they gave Assassin's Creed 2, Fallout New Vegas, Skyrim, Yakuza 0, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Civilization 5, and Minecraft. The Metacritic score, which is an aggregate of several scores given by basically anyone with an opinion, is a 52 out of 100. That's about as mixed as it gets, guys. It obviously wasn't some catastrophic failure, though. Many publications gave it average to high reviews, and you already know the single sold well. At the time of its release, it was even the band's third highest selling album, a major improvement from Maladroit. But it really marked the end of an era. The end of Weezer being able to coast off their early success and get away with mediocre crowd pleasers and bloated maladroits, off of reputation alone. That reputation was gone. Weezer was never universally adored, but now even nostalgia couldn't save it. From this point on, Weezer was a punchline.
Next week on Nokia Unworded Hard Rock Live, Akon! When
the band had finished their Make Believe tour, rumors started to circulate that a breakup was coming. Rivers returned to Harvard, Pat started getting very involved with his side project, The Special Goodness, Brian formed the relationship, and Scott was called back to his home planet. Thankfully, the rumors proved unfounded, with the band starting work on a new album. Released just under 3 years later, you guessed it, Make Believe 2. Okay, sorry, apparently they went with a red. And as the band moved on to new horizons, so did fans. It kind of went the way of albums like Everything Will Be Alright in the End and Hurley, where the only ones that acknowledge it either love it or hate it, with the remaining camp being shocked to learn these weren't fever dreams. The general consensus I've read among fans is that certain tracks like Perfect Situation and Haunt You Every Day are some of the band's best, but the overproduced mainstream pop sound that dominates many tracks limits the album's recognition. What I've found in my research for this video is that Rivers summed up what went wrong with Make Believe pretty accurately with his quote at the beginning of this video. It's a combination of the Green Album and Pinkerton. It just isn't a good combination. Rivers didn't like the direction the band was taking after Green and Maladroit. It was around this time that Pinkerton was being looked back upon fondly by fans and critics, and Rivers was clearly really trying to recapture that sorrowful sound for his next album. But he just wasn't willing to allow himself to go that far emotionally again. Rivers was scared of history repeating itself, with him being too genuine and having the album fail. So he did his best to also keep the radio-friendly sound of Green. This is where tracks like My Best Friend and Beverly Hills come from, and the overproduced sound of the gloomy tracks. In fact, probably more than any other album, this is the one I've seen fans go really nuts for the demos. If you listen to the demos for Haunt You Every Day, Hold Me, or Save Me, you really hear that strong Pinkerton influence. But strangely enough, you can hear the conflict between these two sounds even in the demos. Tell Me What You Did, the demo for This Is Such a Pity, is the best example I've found of this struggle. You can hear the raw, genuine chorus fighting against the sterile version of Pity that would appear in the album.
I don't wanna be a chump. You think I'm a fascist pig. Right now everything is black. I don't think we'll ever get what is going on. What is it we need? Have we gone insane? Is this just our greed?
But the Pinkerton sound lost out in Pity, same as in every other demo. Rivers' insecurity got the best of him, and he didn't let his strong feelings shine through. I was initially going to call Make Believe a tonal nightmare, but listening to it so much for this video has shown me otherwise. It doesn't jump wildly from Pinkerton tracks to Green tracks and vice versa. The sound stays consistently bleh. Nothing's allowed to shine because these objectively different songs are forced to sound alike so that they can be put on the same album. Rivers tried to appease his need to be loved by everyone, and his need to fulfill himself artistically, and in the end failed to truly appease either, and wasted his last bit of generosity from listeners in the process. Shockingly, Pitchfork said it best in their review of Make Believe. Weezer have been given a lot of breaks in their second era. Both the Green Album and Maladroit were cut miles of slack, despite consisting of a little more than slightly above average power pop. But now, there's an antidote to that nostalgic interference. Make Believe will expertly extract the last remaining good graces the critical community has to offer latter-day Weezer. With that said, it breaks my heart to say, out of 10, I give Make Believe a 9.3 out of 10, baby! Better than the Stanley Parable. What the fuck?